Welcome to the ACT Bootcamp with First Choice College. Now we're going to talk about the math section, give a brief overview and some brief strategies about how we can generally attack this section. The math section contains 60 multiple choice questions, and you have 60 minutes to complete this section. This will be the easiest math problem that you have on the test, giving you 1 minute per question and a good pace at which to measure yourself when you're practicing. Calculators, graphing calculators especially, are allowed on this test. But unlike the SAT, if you've taken that, there is no reference section with formulas on this test. So it's worth being aware of that, and we'll discuss that later. On this slide, you can also see some brief information that the ACT will have on the test. And it's worth familiarizing yourself with this to make sure that you understand what it is that you're looking at. Key on this to highlight is that pictures, illustrative figures, are not necessarily drawn to scale. So be clear that whenever you see a right angle, it does not necessarily have to be a right angle. The content of it contains two broad areas. The first is integrating essential skills. It's about 40% of the questions, and this covers areas that you're expected to have had experience with in your past mathematically, in the lead up to high school or in your early years of high school. And that's things like fractions, rates, percentages, proportions, ratios, volume and area, and averages. This area is key to practice because many of us get rusty on this as we're targeting more sophisticated mathematics going forward, and we want to be able to ace these problems with no problem and wasting little time. The second section, preparing for higher math, is about 60% of the questions. And this contains topics like number and quantity, algebra, functions, geometry, and statistics and probability. This math is intended to be the math that you've had most recently, and perhaps the math that you're currently in. It's worth noting that up to 20% of the problems fall into a category we call modeling, in which the categories are mixed, and you'll have two different sections that you have to complete to be able to solve for the variable. So you'll have to create a model of this and then solve for it, and it'll combine ideas from both sections. So when we talk about strategies for the math section, it's worth identifying first and foremost that this is the only section in which the questions are roughly in order of difficulty. All of the questions, however, are worth the same amount of points. So we want to ace the early ones quickly and easily, but spend more time getting them right, and then get on to the hard ones when we need to, and spend an appropriate amount of time getting those right if we can. You also, and we'll cover this again I'm sure later, just like every other section, make sure you have time to fill in a bubble for every answer. So, other points, pace yourself appropriately. 1 minute a question. If you're going over for one, know that you have to come up with that from somewhere else. Know yourself, so know when it makes sense to spend more time, maybe more than a minute, on a question because you know you're going to get it right, but you're a little slower on that one. And know when to give up. Know that you don't know matrices very well, or that you don't know statistics and probability very well by the time you take the test. And we can practice for those, but know yourself and know when to bail, guess, and move on to something that you can get confidently. And know when to take a smart guess. You may have to take a guess, but you should be able to eliminate 2 or 3 wrong answers based on some simple mathematical rules like positives and negatives. Complete a lot of timed practice so your timing feels natural. Just like with every section, you want to get used to the test, and this is the best way to do it. And like I said, be sure you get in and answer every question. On your approaches, recognize that this is not a math test in school, so we need to approach it differently. In the classroom, our teachers are usually concerned with not just us getting the right answer, which we could have gotten from a friend of ours, but also how we got it. They want to know that you understand the principles. The ACT doesn't care. They only care about your answer. So let's use some of the other tools we have that we don't usually have in the real world. One of these is when we're on a tricky problem, plug in an answer. You have your multiple choice answers in front of you. It has to be one of those. Start plugging those in and thinking about what that tells you about the problem. Maybe you get it right just like that. If that doesn't work, you can also think about picking a number of your own. In percentage problems, you can plug in the number 100, and that often will tell you an answer very quickly and easily without doing unnecessary algebra. Moving forward, thinking about your calculator. All of us have different relationships with how much we use our calculators, but you want to be clear that when you use it, it uses time. So as you practice, you want to know when your calculator speeds you up and when it slows you down. I suggest practicing as many problems as possible without calculators, and then going back and doing some problems with calculators and seeing what actually is faster and what is not. Do think about filling your calculator in with formulas that you might want to refer to. This can also be a good cheat sheet for you to try to memorize, but it also gives you a crutch on which you can fall back on in case you're in a panic during the test. At least you know you have some formulas embedded in your calculator and you can go back and look at them. Learn any function or program on your calculator that you might want to use and practice it a lot. You do not want to try to learn anything new on your test. Things like graphing a system of equations and finding the solution are things that you can do, but then you want to be sure that you've been doing it all along. All that said, try practicing without your calculator, see where that gets you, and we'll go from there. We'll be covering lots of different types of problems and the different strategies for individual ones throughout the different other sections going forward. But these general strategies should help you generally throughout the test.